Hi, this is Will, and this is the second of my series of interviews with retired prep school teachers. I wanted to interview teachers who taught mainly the 1970s, 80s and 90s at a time when they had much more room for manoeuvre and could therefore experiment a bit more. And my basic contention was that although the general standard might have been patchier, that room for manoeuvre allowed for some outstanding teaching practice, and I sort of wanted to recover some of that and get a sense of the time and the mood of those prep schools as well. This interview's with Rory Darling. Rory taught at many of the top prep schools in the UK, Summerfields, Cothill, Ludgrove, Aysgarth, and some other ones as well, I think he goes into. And we talk about his views on teaching, what worked for him and what didn't. It seems that most teachers are quite implicit about their kind of method. The thing I like about Rory is he's very explicit, so he has very strong opinions on what's gone wrong in prep school teaching, and also what worked when he was in his prime. So I hope you enjoy it. Rory taught me when I was at school, was an amazing maths teacher, really committed prep school teacher generally, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Thanks. What were the intellectual standards like, both at the prep school and Wellington compared to now?
Prep school, it was only Horace really do it now. I was accelerated to the scholarship form.
From early on?
Yes, having come top of my form, I was jumped up.
Really? Right.
And then did, I think, 2 academic years just in the scholarship form.
So give me a sense of what that looked like. You were sort of 11, and were you reading Shakespeare? What sort of level of maths?
Yes,
yes.
I mean, we did binary when we were in the second forms. I was explaining it to an Eton scholarship candidate last week. He'd never come across binary or on the basis we had to do binary back in when we were 9.
So when you read recollections from those days, prep and senior, there just seemed to be much more time.
This is so much more, and there was when I first started working.
Right.
There just was so much more time.
And how did that help your teaching? If you had more
because
time?
I taught in the way that the people who had impressed me taught. I had 5 years of exceptionally good and some pretty grim. There were bad teachers at Temple Grove. We knew who they were, and that I learnt from how not to do it from them, and how to do it. For Simon Wright, who wrote Waterfield School, that is why I love history. I mean, from the moment I came into his classroom, I taught history at Aysgarth till Duncan Argyll went off to become headmaster of Crawfordton, and at Christmas I had to take over as head of maths. I just taught it the way Simon Wright. I still use his dates charts. I'm handing them out at Elstree. Simon Wright's dates charts are being handed out, and the boys have taken them, so they can become pub balls in history. They've got all the kings and queens. Yeah. I mean, I've added a few events on the end. He stopped at 1969, first man on the moon, and a few
more to go since then.
So, because it was 1974 when I started with him, and that's where his date chart ended.
Why do you think dates and names and events?
I think one of the things down here is, what do the children need to know? If you're going to teach them history, they need to have that overview. Yeah. I can remember at Chandling's sitting through an assembly on the Vikings and then talking very meanly to some year 3 or year 4 children at lunch.
This is quite recently.
Yeah. So tell me all about the Vikings. I said, tell me a famous Viking or a famous battle or where they lived. They knew nothing. They done a whole assembly on food in the Vikings, and they didn't know a single actual fact about what had happened at the time of the Vikings. They did Vikings, Romans and Saxons 1 term each. They couldn't put the 3. They thought the Romans were considerably more modern, because Roman life looks more modern than Viking life. And I was just thinking that it's because none of their actual teachers really knew any history. So they're so scared of teaching history. Now, I know my history dates. You tell me a date, I'll tell you who was king or queen at that point. And I said to the boys who were doing scholarship, I said, you know, for example, the Winchester Engine's paper I gave them in November had St Anselm with William II and Henry I. I said, well, the boys who can tell you something about the context of that time may never have heard of St Anselm. He's the archbishop who spans those two reigns, but at least they will be able to tell you roughly the time that it happened. William II's generally regarded as a sort of bit of a D-grade king. Henry I's a bit of a B-grade king. They will be able to know that Henry's reign ends in chaos because of the White Ship disaster. That's on the fact sheet. They'll be able to know that William II comes after the Domesday Book, after the Norman conquest is more or less settled. The harrying of the North has happened.
Yes.
They can put it in its context.
And as a result, they'll be able to read any bit of comprehension or source work much better than
source work is another thing which made me stop wanting to teach history, because who can bore children more quickly? Ridian talked about the David Byrd books, and I do use them because I have to, because and they are, as far as you go, pretty super, because he's got all the sources in them, but it's so dire.
I mean, you're an Ireland story man.
But when you're coming to 13-year-olds, then it stops being his story and starts becoming, let's analyse a bit more closely. But you're going to put children off if it's not a fabulous story at the start.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Thin Red Line school of history may be out of fashion, but it's the Ronald Welch books, which I read avidly as a child, and Aysgarth boys used to have them read to them. We used to do pictures and diagrams in prep, as I didn't want studying history prep. How quickly are you going to put them off it? They had to write in history notes. I taught them how to take notes. Boys have still come back and said, "God, it's fabulous at university now. I can just. Other people can't write notes, but I learnt it from you." When they're year 5, they basically copied the board. When they're year 8, they're basically making them up themselves. Yeah. And Simon Wright taught us to do that. But such a prep. So they copied maps and pictures. While I read them Ronald Welch stories.
Reminds me of Rory Stewart being taught the Battle of Waterloo by his dad on Hyde Park with little
I reconstructed
figures,
the Battle of Hastings in a classroom. That was a bit of a disaster by piling all the tables up on one side. I was in trouble at Yarlett Hall.
That was the hall,
hill. Exactly. We had Harold on the top of it, and we had the famed
fighting off it.
I got in trouble because I literally did pile up all the desks at one side of the classroom, and then I did Edge Hill. I used to do Edge Hill. We did Edge Hill completely. We had 2 forms doing Edge Hill on a lovely slope. And Prince Rupert charging down and chasing them all. They chased them onto the rugby pitch at the bottom and then disappearing in it. Meanwhile, that's the way.
Was that philosophy of, I suppose, what you call pedagogy? Did that apply to all subjects? It wasn't just history, but was it knowledge based and was it didactic, or was it any trendy group work, project work?
No. God, I'm famous because I have this aversion to scissors and Pritt sticks, and the sheer idea of group work fills me with horror. I do lip service, as does the 2 words which have ruined my teaching because they instill fear in me. It's the 2 words lesson plan.
Yes. Let's go on to talk about. You were saying earlier that you learnt from how you were taught yourself. Were there any other structures in place for development, training?
No heads of departments. Yeah. The person who taught the oldest boys generally was the better teacher and sort of said, I think we'll use this paper. But you just got on with it. There was no head of history at Yarlett Hall.
Any lesson observations?
No.
No. I mean, how did you feel, even just within yourself, that you were getting better as a teacher?
Good headmaster listens to his pupils. He knows what his pupils are chatting about. One of the things that saddened me when Ridian said he didn't have time to teach at Papelwick. Well, that's a major down mark for you, Ridian. Whatever you did, you must teach. Sid teaches at Elstree. Simon Barber teaches at Ludgrove. Even David Faber teaches at Summerfields. You've got to carry on making the pretense that the reason you are a headmaster is because you were a teacher before. Otherwise, we're getting to the state where we'll bring in a human resources manager to run the school.
The CEO or principal,
So lesson plans are one of the reasons I effectively, because I suddenly was being given this idea that what I was doing was in some way wrong. And
because you couldn't tabulate it in the lesson
plan. I can't. I'm at Judith Lane. Robin Banner Thornhill said, Judith, I want lesson plans, I want short-term forecasts, I want this, I want that. And she said, Robin, if I know what I'm doing in 4 weeks' time, I'd be so depressed I'd have to stop teaching. You know, it's absolutely that. I mean, trust us. If you don't trust us, move us on.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. The headmasters, if they knew a member of staff was no good, they see it in the results, they hear it from the boys, they get mutterings from the parents, they move them sideways or move them on.
Can we just go back to maths a little bit,
Yeah.
Rory, and just because certainly my memory of you at Somerfields was as this titanic figure in the maths department. But were there any particular tricks, techniques that you developed yourself? I remember you designed a program that taught us about, it was the first computer program I think I'd ever come across, about almost becoming our own tradespeople.
Oh yes, well that was the share dealing project. Was it? I did two where I had an absolute cheat. Robin Osmond, who's now a high-powered merchant banker, made up sort of with my kind of assistance, but not much. He did most of it. A fabulous kind of economy game. You are the ruler of a country. And then I think there was Hammurabi.
Okay.
It was a kind of spin-off which we did at Wellington on old paper producing computers.
Okay.
And I did one of those at Somerfields, and I remember a boy suddenly finding I couldn't log into my system because a boy was, logged into it, taking my password and was playing it.
For me, that sounds quite trendy and
No,
experimental.
but it was only because teaching basic
Yeah.
is so good. Teaching BBC Basic, and then we had the share dealing one where they had to select. But then we had trouble with parents giving insider deals to their boys. Suddenly, boys were buying shares in extraordinary out of their 100,000 I'd mythically given them, and there were boys coming, making immense profits on these completely remote firms, and I just wondered, how do you? I just picked it out of I discovered that fathers were there was insider trading was taking place on that. So,
but for a traditionalist like you, that sounds very real world learning to me. Is that only a bonus for the end of term? You'd never.
The share dealing one always went on through the year. What's now year 5. I get so muddled with different schools.
Yeah.
Summerfields, it must have been the second forms.
Yeah.
The other one was me saying, let's make up this kind of economy game because. But I think I've always had in maths. I've always had that focus that it is utterly crucial that they pass common entrance in it, and that's why I was always given the weaker ones for the actual final two common entrance years. I mean, we shared it round in the 2s and the 3s, but I tended to have the weaker ones. I'm going to be very careful what I say now. But Andy Bishop and I made sure, and then Peter Paul and I made sure that the insecure ones were always going to jump the hurdle of common entrance. There was a problem at Somerfields. I would just say that Aysgarth maths was the easy subject. The Aysgarth boys were super at maths.
Right.
For some reason, Somerfields, you had these boys who'd been drilled at. They could learn off by rote, and they thought they could learn maths off by rote. Whereas the Aysgarth boys were more open. They really hadn't learnt anything off by rote. Some of them arrived barely able to read and write, but their brains were more open to practicalities. Where you had these very structured little boys from London who'd done everything by rote. They'd never been off without their parents. So Somerfields, I was surprised that for many boys maths was a problem.
Right.
They
knew their times tables. But
Somerfields was very hard to get them to realise that you had to understand it. It was almost as if you could learn the answer to every fraction calculation. Whereas, so I arrived from Aysgarth where maths was the easy subject and it was a delight to teach it. Whereas at Somerfields it was a struggle with a lot of boys who were very unreceptive to learning a process as opposed to a fact. So Latin, they'd happily go away, and that the scourge of all prep schools, the modern languages department, the French department, now, because as you know, only a third of the boys at Eton carry on with French. I mean, it's effectively French is an irrelevance in the modern world, and they're far better off learning Chinese or Spanish. But Somerfields became besotted with French, with a French trip that made teaching maths with 3 classes in a set. They were permanently going off to France. So I remember producing an actual thing of how many lessons I had missed through exams, through the French trips, and so you're expecting me to cover the curriculum.
With a meagre.
With fewer lessons.
So, those boys that were sort of squeezed through at age 13, did you hear from them that actually they then found their feet later on with maths? Is it possible? I mean, do you think maths is
I think, well, now, but basically, if you can do common entrance, higher level common entrance, then you think, oh my God, these GCSE papers are so easy.
Yeah.
There's a problem with the ISEB, which in maths became a real problem in the mid-90s, is that they don't test their papers sufficiently. These papers are not trialled enough. They're taken by, 16,000 children, as opposed to the Key Stage 2 tests, which are taken by 750,000 children. So the Key Stage 2 tests of maths, which I were great papers, because it was almost impossible for a clever boy to get the wrong end of the stick. And the maths ISEB, particularly in the mid-90s, early noughties, you had these questions where boys got the wrong end of the stick because they were written by people who didn't realise you haven't trialled it.
Yeah.
And the ICB is a bit naughty about not trialling their papers sufficiently.
Yeah.
But if you've done high level common entrance, maths GCSE is a doddle.
Yeah. And then how do you think, either with history and maths, that they sort of stayed with your pupils beyond their school lives? I have letters from
yes,
people
I have Aysgarth boys who say they are just aware. I'm shining my halo as well, but they say that they have a kind of context. They have that skeleton of history. If you only do the Tudors and the Second World War, you have a very warped view of history. The ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, you can be a pub quiz bore, of that level of nerdiness, or you just have an ability to put things into context.
There are other things that schools did well, like at Somerfields there was the general knowledge test, which seemed to enthrone knowledge around the school generally. Were there other things that...
I think, certainly if I take my Temple Grove, we learnt the capitals of every country as a fun. There were ones you had to learn, and then it became a bit of a sort of nerdy thing to say a wagadoodoo, or to throw out sadly Upper Volta's now changed its name to Burkina Faso, but it became a sort of how obscure could you and to know your global location. I always think global location is the equivalent of history dates.
Yeah. It's the frame, the context.
Yeah. Yes. I play Paris to Peking. If you send me to Germany, I can send you back. If you send them back to Holland, they're then stuck because they can't get anywhere. One person tries to get to Peking, the other person sends. You can do it with a class, just a little sort of. But I didn't have time. Time fillers. The time fillers was sort of this whole idea of having a little thing that you're going to do to a plenary activity.
Yes.
No, quite often the end of the lesson would be chaos. Oh my God, let's run over, quickly shut your books closed and go. Yeah. Which to an inspector is the most appalling way to end a lesson.
You haven't structured your...
No, that's why I said that it really became where I became insecure about that was what I was doing all wrong, and everything that the policy statement said what I was doing at Somerfields was wrong.
Right.
During the noughties.
So it led to
me becoming incredibly insecure about it.
You didn't have the confidence of your colleagues to say, actually, I think we're probably doing this right.
John Mayle and people like that said, I've seen it all. I've seen it come, it goes up. I just carry on. Sometimes I'm in fashion, sometimes I'm out of fashion.
A strong school culture should be able to push
if I'm
back
no
against
good,
that.
If I'm no good, I get sidelined.
Yeah.
I get pushed to one side, and if I'm criminally bad, I'll be sacked. If I'm no good, a good teacher knows when he's being sidelined. Well, sorry, a sensible person knows when they're being sidelined and tries to do something about it.
Yeah.
Those types of teachers, of the Nick Aldridges, the John Mayles, specifically taking people who are now dead, the Gavin Hannahs, they go in and out of fashion. And there are similar ones at other schools.
Who were the best teachers you taught with?
Well, Nick, probably.
Aldridge.
Yes, Nick Aldridge.
For those that don't know him, he taught scholarship classics and English as well. Yeah.
English to upper third, and then John Mell took him over for shell remove. What was it called? Upper remove.
What made him such a great teacher?
Because he never planned a lesson, knowing that you were doing. It's funny, you know when the children are interested in your lesson, and you know when they're not. At least I do. And I'll give you an example. Elstree last Wednesday afternoon, we had a photo outside the front of Dowie Abbey. The choir, about 40 boys, were then put into a vestry, not a lot bigger than this room, which was very hot. So as I said, they had to sit on the floor, because I could see this getting a kettle, literally, sit on the floor or sit on a chair. So they sit on the floor, sit on the chair. I'm thinking, this could end up with some. And what's more, we had the headmaster of Pangbourne, who's a parent, over there, and we had a couple of other people sort of who were singing in it who had never seen it. So I said, right, sit. I told them the story of the withered arm. Okay, I was thinking of doing the monkey's paw, but I think this is actually the vestry of an abbey. So I just told what monkey's paw, so the withered arm, until the director of music came in and wanted to talk to them and run through something. So now, some people, it might have become a problem. Will you listen? Will you listen? Now stop doing that.
Yeah.
I didn't have any problems. Yeah. I could tell the withered arm, I had them mesmerised when the Gertrude Lodge puts her hand against the. I've read it enough to show it times to children. It's a useful bit of Thomas Hardy. Then in comes the director of music, does a little practice with us so that the headmaster of Pangbourne could practice his solo, and then she leaves. And we've got another 5 minutes to keep these boys who are just unsettled again. So we played that game where they've got to count to 20. One boy goes 1, I go 1. Anybody can say 2, but if 2 people say it, we have to go back to 1. We got to 4. For 5, that keeps them. Now, you may say that's
a bag of tricks.
Now I've learned those little tricks. I wouldn't have been able to do that when I first arrived at Yarlett Hall, but I know what works. Yep. And perhaps because I'm effectively a prep school boy at heart, if I'm bored, they're bored. Everybody knows I count claps in prize givings. At Summerfields, I just stop after a while. When we got on to over 5,500, I'm literally getting clapping away. But if I'm bored, they're bored. And when I'm, I often tell boys, Churchill's, he gave some talk at some...
Charles or Winston?
Winston. Yes, a good point. He gave some talk at some Conservative association, and he knew he had bored them by the end, and he said, I'm so sorry, I didn't have time to write a short speech. And I say to the boys, that is the essence. Do you think all those fabulous quotes that we have, do you think they came inspirationally? Well, some may have done, but he isn't he the man who said he had all the quips lined up, ready for that moment? I'm probably rambling now.
No.
But if you have prepared, and when you're boring people, you're very good looking like you're not bored, but you know what I mean. I can tell when I'm boring people.
I suppose.
At least I can't tell if I'm boring you.
The whole idea about the lesson plan, the idea that you can still be very prepared without necessarily evidencing your preparation.
Yes.
And you've had a lifetime of preparation.
But even when I arrived as 18, I'm sure I didn't make big mistakes. I remember clipping a boy around the ear as a joke in an English lesson. You idiot, I went. And he rather moved into my hand, and I hit him harder than I meant to. And he probably goes, I got this day. And I sort of, you twit like that. And he sort of, to dodge, it all went wrong. And I can think of one with Nigel Talbot-Rice, where he made it seriously wrong in a league feast with Archie. I think I stop there. But he judged it wrong, and he smacked a boy on the face as a joke. And I made this boy nearly cry, and I realised, I know how much you learn, because that was the wrong. I had judged the situation wrongly. Now there are plenty of lessons where I've judged the situation badly. I've lost my temper. Things have simply gone wrong. I don't think I lose my temper as much as I probably did. Whereas quite often people, as they get older into their 50s, lose their temper more because they find the children frustrating.
What makes a great head in a...
Great head is somebody who's learnt their trade in a prep school. There's no two ways about it. The curse of the public school housemaster. And because they simply think a prep school is a little proto-public school, and it's utterly different. I would be useless teaching in a public school. I mean, I know that from my days each week at Eton. There's no way. I mean, I'm designed to teach in prep schools.
Yeah.
They are two different things. So, I mean, Nigel learnt his trade in a prep school. Sid learnt his trade in a prep school. I mean, Simon Barber learnt his trade. Nicholl Marston did. Gerald Barber, the great ones. David Carr.
So it's
learnt their trade in prep schools.
Intuitive training for them rather than reading a policy and saying, "Oh, we'll do this, this, and this."
I think there's been a slight problem with the end of national service. People like Nigel had done national service. They'd learnt how to manage, and I think this is across the board. I think there is a generation of prep school headmasters who are too fearful of just saying, Nigel's famous. He used the word bollocking once, and eventually, I can't remember which female member of staff at Summerfield says, "Do we have to use the term bollocking at this point?"
What about discipline, though? Because I remember standing outside his study, and it was just terrifying to be there waiting.
Matthew James, when he sorry Matthew, if you're listening to this, but Matthew James stayed on for an extra year. Super chap, from a great family, and he and Ewan Davidson were permanently being unprefected. Literally, and I remember being in the study with him. Well, he got a bollocking from Nigel for whatever crime he'd done. He was a super chap, but he just couldn't help himself going into Summertown or doing whatever. They were not evil things, but I have told you not to do this. You must. I set an example, and he went, "Sir, I think I'm going to be sick." And fled from the study. I just because Nigel could be like that.
Roasting.
I mean, Nigel never bears a grudge. You're still alive, Nigel. Never bears a grudge. So you could have a blazing row in that study, and then afterwards is absolutely, completely and utterly. Once it was agreed in the study, and I've had some of the biggest headmasterly member of staff arguments with Nigel, but once you had convinced him of what it was you wanted to do, or once you had convinced him that you hadn't done what he said you had done, you were outside the door. It was the same front in front of the boys, and he never bears a grudge.
So, and do you think it's good for boys to, for their sort of moral and ethical development, to have such a strong disciplinary figure at the head of a school who, in a sense, acts as the role of
I mean, you and I both know that, and this is true in public schools and it's true in prep schools, headmasters, whether they be Anthony Selden, Nigel Talbot-Rice, they are a weird breed.
Yeah.
And if the children don't instantly sit up, don't instantly become aware that there is somebody slightly different coming into the room, then then there's a little bit of a problem.
Do you think you can learn that presence? It must be so awful if you want to be a prep school headmaster and you realise you don't have that presence.
I think you can, if you're lucky enough to have been in the presence of a David Carr, in my case, a Nigel Talbot-Rice, I'm a Gerald and Nicholl, Sid and Simon Barber.
Did you ever want to be a head yourself, Rory?
I thought I did. I discovered I can't manage my colleagues. I would have sacked everybody. It's as simple as that. And that's what I discovered at Summerfields. I just assumed. I can remember years back at Aysgarth, Stuart Tate, who was the senior master, very gently taking me to one side because we were talking about how we couldn't fit everything into the term, and I said at a staff meeting, well, it's just simple. If we did an extra week of term, we could just spread it up. And all these stuff, because I was so keen on teaching, and suddenly realised that you do realise you would make yourself incredibly unpopular. Because for me the holidays were a bit sort of boring, So, whereas because when there were bachelor members of staff in those days, you immersed yourself completely in the school. Yeah. All other outside considerations had gone. What's the two greatest things? Free access to a photocopier and the smart board. The two things I have loved.
Their introduction.
So they're nothing else. Nothing else. The smart board is fantastic. And because now I can show pictures of Character Chevalier. When I was at Aysgarth, I used to have to draw The Aysgarth used to have to use the backs of pieces of paper. The school was so short of money
Wow.
that you used. So I remember handing out one of Anne Flowers' science preps in the schoolroom, which is no longer there, and the back had the minutes of the governor's meeting with sale of Newton Bank, because the school was selling off land in order to stop going bankrupt. And boys going, so, staff redundancies, sale of Newton. And I think we'll have that science prep back with and just go and draw a set of ovaries or something, which was always given because there was a member of staff who couldn't stand, and on purpose used to give the boys labelling unfortunate diagrams, because there was a member, this is absolutely disgusting. People who know Aysgarth will know who I'm talking about. This is absolutely disgusting. It's absolute muck, this science prep. I'm not having this put out in front of me. Actually, it's more of a Nottinghamshire accent. But people from Aysgarth will know exactly who I'm talking about. But she did it specifically on purpose. This is also a member of staff that when John Hodgkinson announced he was changing the report form, because he didn't like the previous one, he'd been about, you can't do that, headmaster. And John said, no, at the end, it's the beginning of term meeting, at the end of this term, I'm going to have a new report form, so I want to form a committee to, what it's going to be. And anyway, you can't. He taught geography and art. And John said, well, it's the end of term. I've written these reports for this term. And he was always a term in advance, in order that if he felt ill at the end of term, they were all written. So the weird thing is, his reports are fairly accurate about the children. So he would write the report at the beginning of the term, but in the holidays, ready to hand in at the end of term. That's the way things. Well, it's just I do accept such things are unacceptable, but also I accept. Well, I think people must accept that parents who. Ridian was quite clear about this, wasn't he? About the way that I feel so sorry for a child, and I'm not saying which prep school this is, but there are prep schools where parents have come back into the end of term tea party, clutching the report, and have bearded members of staff at that point. No, you stupid people, go home with your child, have a few days, and then. And that's the side of things. Why we stopped running Savages. We've reckoned a third of the boys in that lodge when we left were there. Their parents loved them dearly, but didn't actually want them at home. So when you come to boarding point, which you put down the bottom, this is really where I have a problem with boarding. Those children who come from normal families, no trouble at all. And when I say a normal family, I'm going to be really reactionary here, because I've got one set where the husband took time out because the wife was the high flyer, and I've got other ones where I know where wives have taken the time out. They have a parent at home until they're 5, and those children are balanced. The ones who've gone off to nursery or been brought up by Filipinos or any other non-British traditional people, they are not. And you have these children who, it's awfully lovely having these children, but it's an awful interruption to my career. So you find that they, in the holidays, you say, where have you been in the holidays? Oh, I've been off to the Bermuda with the such and such. Then we went to Scotland with the such and such. They parcel their children around. One set of parents takes 2 weeks off and takes about a party of a whole load of other children and spoils them rotten in Mauritius. And they don't actually spend any time at home. And for me, at my prep school, all right, vast majority it was the mothers who didn't work. But I have seen instances, one of my goddaughters, her father, the mother was going to make much more money. She's carried on with the career, and he's taken time out to bring up 2 lovely girls. And the other thing is divorce. Please, parents who listen to this, if you die, your children get over it quicker than if you divorce and send them to a boarding school. And all parents of divorced children should understand that their children at boarding school really, really think, if I was at home, I would get mummy and daddy back together again. Summerfield has been very unlucky with parental deaths. Those children have not been damaged. They think their mother or father is in heaven. It's final. It's something they cannot. But the divorcee children. I remember a father at Summerfield saying to me, dropping off his son, arriving into the second form, and saying to me, Freddie doesn't know this, but whatever the mother's name was, I forget, and I have decided to part amicably. And I said to him, well, could you not stay together amicably for a bit longer? And I was that blunt. Another email I've just got before you press on. I remember, Ludgrove parents, I've just got the email still, because I thought I wasn't going to go back to teaching. I wrote in it, if you treat the staff at Eton in the way that you've treated me, you'll make your son's progress through that school so much harder than it needs to be. And we are human. You shout at us. We're not.
The question is the status of the human. Are you human or are you just staff? Chattel.
Which comes to the whole human resources issue.
Yes.
The other huge change that I have seen is the growth in schools of people who are nothing to do with teaching and who don't understand teachers and are jealous of our contact with children, and whose only thing, at Summerfields that they've got nothing to do because they produce another thing about producing badges for the car park. This whole thing, these people look upon us as a resource, and they used to be there to help us. Now they think, and there have been big problems with human resources departments in big schools. Those people at that school will know who I'm talking about. But they just simply don't understand that their role in the school is to facilitate the teaching, and we are the ones as teachers who are there to make sure that the children are. There was no bursar at my prep school. There was no bursar at Yarlett Hall. There was no bursar at
the head.
The head signed the checks. I think they just weren't. He had Mrs. Ticehurst, who was the school secretary. I mean, presumably somebody banked the checks. Gerald Barber had no bursar at Ludgrove. When I went to Ludgrove, there was no bursar. John Vaux, lovely chap up at Yorkshire, you went into his office and you said, and he did his best to help you. He never, he was the bursar, but he would never cross his mind to be difficult. We are on a very rigid timetable. We don't work with other adults, we work with children. That's why I've been a staff room. I never work with my colleagues. I'm doing my work on my own. And I sound like a dinosaur because I am a dinosaur. I refuse to carry a mobile phone. This is because I refuse to let them email me. It's as simple as that. I will not answer and fill in these stupid forms.
I suppose that those members of staff have had such a different initiation into the whole culture of prep school than you did. I mean, not only were you a boy, but that whole journey from 18 onwards is a process of initiation, and admin staff on the whole don't get that.
Yes, and I think the point is that all schools in Britain, I think, ran from a basic British way of doing things from the 50s and the 60s, of which I caught the end of it in the 70s, and it's carried on into at Ludgrove and to a certain extent, in Ludgrove and Sunningdale, and to a slight extent a couple of other schools, but not Summerfields, I'm afraid, still have that ethos. Okay, Summerfields threw the baby out of the bathwater with the dining room. A school that does not eat together, with set places. A school with a cafeteria system where you go in, you sit with your friends, you chuck it away at the end. You go into the Summerfields dining room, and I've been there on a work day, you see staff all collected at one table, some staff talk to the boys, you talk to boys. Trying to think which headmaster said he could tell the good ones, because looking around the room, you could see the ones who liked talking to the boys at lunch. If you're not prepared to stand at the end, doling out and slapping out the food.
Small, medium or large.
Yeah, small, medium or large, as it goes down
medium,
the table.
large.
Teaching them manners, waiting. I was an old Wellingtonian colleague, sort of chap who was in my year at Wellington. I had two boys at Summerfield, so I was his tutor to the older one. And this boy suddenly revealed to me, I haven't eaten anything. I just take it. I'm just living on the toast in the evening. I take the food, I sign, I get ticked in, I take the food, I chuck it in the bin, and I go out again. When they went over to that, the staff had to sit at the end of the tables. Some were saddled. So I sat you'd see a table of boys, so you'd sit at the seat at the end. Well, they finished their meal. Bye, sir, we're off. And then I'd be eating my pudding, and then a boy who'd had a late music lesson would come in and put a tray down beside me, and I go, "Oh, lovely to sit," and I'm not going to leave that boy on his own. So I'd sit there for ages, waiting, please eat up, and because he's chatting, he's going to eat slowly, but you can. But
important.
At Elstree, if there's a boy who's too slow on the table, I go, right, you're on silence, but everybody else has got to tell you a joke, so that you choke as you're eating your food. Come on, I want good jokes from all the people who've finished. He can't talk anymore because he's finishing up. But then but I mean, a school that doesn't eat together, the gossip in the dining room. I remember asking a removes boy in my final phase at Summerfields. He'd been in school for 4 years with a boy in the year above him, and I said, "Could you take this to such?" I don't know who he is. He wasn't a well-known boy. I mean, a sort of captain of the first team. But I said, "You've been in the school for 4 years with him."
I'm conscious of
yes,
lunch calling,
exactly.
but you think about sort of the next generation or two. If there was one thing you were hopeful for, or one thing you were concerned
about. Yes, I've written it on.
Yeah.
The one thing I think is the boys see through the crap.
Yeah. So the children are your.
I don't know if the girls do, but certainly from the Burford School girls that I come through, they're seeing through the crap as well. They can tell who the good teachers are. So I do genuinely think my faith in human nature is there, that regardless of the ridiculous level of bureaucratic nonsense that is thrown at them. But the reason, with all the PC crap that has been thrown at children since the 70s, obviously the 93% who are educated in the state, that still that British bloody mindedness comes through. And I see it in children.
If there's one facet of modern education that most worries you, you've talked about quite a few, but if there was one that you think is a real thorn that is in the side of independent prep education, needs to be extracted.
Oh, what an interesting. Sorry, I haven't prepared.
Sorry.
Not that I prepared every single answer. I think it's management that do not know really what superb teaching is. Superb teaching is from the ancient Greeks, is a person who. There was a very good Eton question on a general paper a little while ago about the relationship between teacher and pupil, speaking from 500 or 600 BC, and it was so apt then and it's so apt today about the relationship between the teacher has to lead. He is not simply sort of a primum inter pares. He is out there at the front, inspiring and leading the lesson. The moment you say, "Let's all work from the textbook and I'll come around and help you individually," then you know that you're...
Game over.
Yeah. The most inspirational university lecturers, the great people, the famous Oxford people who go down in history for delivering stunning lectures, they're not involving group work, handing out scissors and Pritt sticks and putting them into groups. They are inspiring. The great sermonizers, the great preachers. You and I have sat through so many sermons, and I'm sitting through them again at Eton, and I'm sitting through them again at Elstree, and we had a Eton housemaster suddenly take the place of an Eton colleague who was ill. He turned up, he was given Uriah the Hittite as a text selected previously. He had 12 hours warning, and off the cuff, he had the boys absolutely there from the moment. And we have people who turn up from public schools and who read out a sermon. Now, the moment you know, and I know, that the moment a sermon is read out, instantly it doesn't work. Yeah. And I say that, it's like public speaking, that it just, you've got to have the gift.
It kills it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I say to boys when I'm introducing public speaking, I know what I want to say in this lesson, but I don't know how I'm going to say it until I'm standing literally constructing this sentence.
Yeah.
And if I get it wrong, I can tell because you're not listening to me. If I get it right, I know you're there. And some people have got it and some people haven't. There you go.
Rory, thanks so much. That's really kind and fantastic. Thanks.